For decades, China's rise felt unstoppable. Factories, cities, and fortunes built at impossible speed, turning the nation into the engine of the global economy. But the boom has cracked. A property crisis, deflation, and disappearing jobs have left millions searching for the next promise of growth. That promise now lies in data, chips, and artificial intelligence as China races to overtake the United States. From the deserts of Xinjiang to the glowing towers of Beijing, billions are being poured into an invisible war for technological dominance. And as that battle moves from factories to firewalls, the world's next conflict may not be fought with tanks, but with algorithms, servers, and silence. This is China's new war: economic, digital, and unstoppable.
China's economic growth was like nothing the world has ever experienced before. But now it's seeing a significant slowdown.
There's the property crisis and all of the fallout from there.
We're not expecting any meaningful recovery in Chinese property market in 2024.
You're seeing deflationary pressures play out in China right now.
This is the deepest and the longest deflation in China since 1998 Asian financial crisis.
The stock market has lost some $6 trillion in value just over the last year and a half. You're seeing rises in unemployment, particularly among the country's youth.
The challenge for the rest of the world is that this slowdown means China is now cutting back on spending. That means Louis Vuitton sells fewer handbags, Apple sells fewer iPhones, and Chinese funding on railways in Africa and ports in Europe dries up.
Everybody from big multinational companies to ordinary people have been swept up in China's boom story. That's now coming to an end.
In short, it's bad for the global economy. The question is, how bad? Before we can understand the impact of all of this, we need to get to grips with how bad things are in China. Because for most of the past 2 decades, the country's growth has been unstoppable.
This is an economy that became the world's factory floor by driving up tons and tons of expansion and becoming this giant manufacturing powerhouse.
The country's GDP regularly saw double-digit growth, and in 2010, it overtook Japan to become the world's second largest economy.
People who were farmers moved to the cities and became factory workers. It brought tremendous amounts of wealth to all of these people, really just driving them up out of poverty and into this burgeoning, massive middle class.
The rise of China's middle class benefited a wide range of multinational brands. Volkswagen, for example, sold over 500,000 cars in China in 2005. By 2019, it was 4 million. Apple's China sales went from almost $13 billion to close to $70 billion within a decade. By 2018, the cosmetics giant Estee Lauder relied on China for most of its sales growth. 36-year-old Stephanie has only known a surging China. She started working 10 years ago helping companies enter the Chinese market. She just assumed the quality of life would keep improving.
在几年前的时候，大家都是觉得，来中国都有很多的发展机会，收入的范围其实就是在3万上下。我到年底的时候，我可能想说，那我奖励自己一个包，就是这样。之前比较喜欢 YSL。
But then, that boom story came to a halt. During the pandemic, China stuck to a strict COVID-0 policy that made local governments spend massive amounts of money on quarantine and testing, and saw businesses, factories, and entire cities shut down over a handful of infections. Geopolitics, especially tensions with the US, have exacerbated the problems facing China's economy. Former President Donald Trump imposed a raft of tariffs on Chinese goods. And the Biden administration's limits on China's access to chip technology, along with concerns about a possible conflict over Taiwan, have all meant foreign businesses have reduced their direct investment into China. And there's also the property crisis.
This is an economy that was built up through this rapid expansion of infrastructure projects fueled by rapid buildup of debt among developers, among local governments. You've seen the government crack down on bad actor developers trying to rein in unnecessary spending or shadow debt, but that's created this massive confidence crisis within China. We've also seen that translate into weakness within the stock market. People flee the equities market under this fear that the economy is just slowing down too much.
上下车当心缝隙，请注意脚下安全。
In 2023, Stephanie was let go when her employer decided to downsize its operations in China.
我其实是从来没有想过失业这件事情会发生在我身上。我觉得这个事情是应该只是那些比如说有重大失误的这样的一个前提下，所以这件事情发生的时候，我第一个反应就是为什么是我
Stephanie is not alone.
我被裁员了。
我被裁员了。原因是因为我的成本比较高。
我失业了。
Nearly 1 in 3 Chinese office workers reported falling salaries in 2023, the highest share in at least 6 years. To make ends meet, Stephanie found a job as an insurance agent, but her income saw a big drop.
还没有过这种每天像过山车一样的这种收入的这样的生活。当你没有这种信心的时候，你就会把这些没有用的这些消费就先放下。现在最大的减少就是直接从市区搬到了郊区，所以这个房租就一下省了不少钱。我之前是6000，现在降到了2000多。
For those who are entering the job market, the situation is even worse. In fact, youth unemployment got so bad that China stopped publishing the data for a few months. Fresh graduates like Yang Shifang and her girlfriend now have to keep a close eye on their finances.
Oh my god， 它直接标在上面平价菜。我们下回可以来这边买哦。一般菜的话，像盒马那种，它是晚上8点钟之后是会有打折的，而且它的折扣压得很低。
买一个小白菜，这个小白菜竟然只要9毛钱。
这位柳是6折，然后这里边的话基本都是6折，都是。
但是呢，它就是新鲜度会稍微低一些，但我觉得这个倒不用很在意，因为你买回家肯定马上就做掉了，不可能说再放下去了。是特别冷。
对啊，之前没有昨天冷哎。
对对。
我个人是比较喜欢逛的，但是我看到那些东西就没有太大的去购买的欲望。我这边还有日本流行的，那边还
它很有名的，在以前。哦，我真的很喜欢这一张，
好漂亮。
等到我中年的时候，应该就可以，匹配它的那个消费水平了。
我赚多少钱就过什么样的生活，没必要说非得为了那些钱去奔波劳累。父辈那一代就是他们可以靠他们的双手努力就好了，但是我们这一代并不一样的。
我听到好多打折，一个开心回头了，怎么会这样啊？
It's this change in attitude that will have broader implications for the rest of the world. All those companies that depended on China for much of their growth are going to have a way tougher time going forward. And that has implications for spending outside China too.
We still haven't really seen that returned tourism to other parts of the world in the way that you'd ultimately want to see out of the Chinese spender.
And finally, there's the political piece, which has big consequences.
This new economic reality in China is also likely to lead to this new political reality.
The slowdown complicates things for President Xi Jinping, who's seeking to solidify his position as China's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong.
巩固和增强经济回升向好态势，实现经济行稳致远。
When the economy is booming, people are more likely to accept the Communist Party's controls on things, like freedom of speech in exchange for prosperity. A slowing economy risks the opposite reaction. It also means China's influence outside the country may be curtailed, with foreign spending on the same scale as recent years becoming harder to justify. There are ramifications for U.S. taxpayers too. China has, for much of the past 3 decades, been one of the single biggest investors in U.S. treasuries, bonds sold by the U.S. government to pay for public services. China has already cut back on its U.S. debt holdings in a big way. If that continues, it could become more expensive for the U.S. to borrow money. For now, it's ordinary Chinese bearing the brunt of the slowdown.
我对生活没有说太大的希望。 因为我觉得期望越大，失望越大。
当大家觉得经济好的时候，觉得自己，每个人都觉得自己第2年肯定比第1年能赚更多的钱，然后或者说我只要换一份工作，我就能比这份工作赚更多的钱。之前大家所有人都是这样想的，但是现在，我亲身经历，包括身边朋友的经历，就发现其实事实不是这样的。
Here, in this remote northwestern corner of China, is a town at the center of the country's AI ambitions.
We are going to go there to see how is the construction going and basically get a better understanding of how these data centers fit in with the overall strategy for China to build its AI capabilities.
The Xinjiang region is sensitive. China's been accused of human rights abuses against its ethnic Uyghur population. Foreign journalists who go here are monitored.
It seems to be a white car following us. I'm not sure what it is.
This barren area is becoming central to China's push for AI supremacy over the US. A Bloomberg News investigation has revealed these data centers aim to install more than 115,000 high-end US-designed chips. Chips which are supposed to be banned from entering China.
I found that there's one local government in Xinjiang which approved more than 30 investment projects late last year. And these investment projects all entailed using high-end chips from NVIDIA.
These are chips that China has not been able to access for multiple years. The documents contain no explanation of how they would get the chips. You can only legally send those chips to China with a US government license.
So, are these companies bluffing? Or can Chinese data centers readily get their hands on the world's most restricted semiconductors?
If this development goes as planned, and they are filled with these kinds of chips, it just goes to show how difficult or really impossible it is to stop Chinese companies, government entities from buying these things.
In order to investigate what was happening, my colleague James Major and myself, we decided to fly out to Xinjiang. And where we were going was a little bit more to the north. The Yiwu County, which is the epicenter of the data centers, is another 2-hour drive.
Billions of dollars in data centers are being built in this remote area. This is key infrastructure in China's push to become a global leader in AI by 2030. For the last decade, Beijing's invested heavily in high-tech industries, and some are starting to pay off.
Chinese AI startup DeepSeek has rocked to global technology stocks, really raising questions over America's tech dominance.
For the first time, a Bloomberg investigation has exposed the scale of China's AI build-out in the northwestern desert and the potential role of banned US chips.
Based on my data analysis and data sourcing, I found that China is building huge data centers in Xinjiang. The data center will use NVIDIA servers and chips.
Project approval documents show local governments in Xinjiang and in neighboring Qinghai have greenlit a total of 39 data centers that intend to use more than 115,000 banned NVIDIA processors. NVIDIA H100 and H200 chips are the industrial standard for training large language models. A US ban was supposed to keep them out of China. But Bloomberg's been unable to verify whether the data centers actually have access to these chips. It's possible the companies are making claims they can't deliver.
Chinese companies sometimes have a pattern of pursuing the start of infrastructure projects that are not ultimately completed. But you also have to take seriously that these documents say that they want to do this, and that the construction is happening in a region that has a lot of the other resources and infrastructure necessary to support an AI data center build out.
Initially, the data centers were happy to invite us in to see their server rooms, but the invitation was quickly revoked.
We originally agreed with one of the companies that they would speak to us, and they would even allow us to go inside the construction site to see how it's progressing. but at the last minute, that visit was cancelled.
Without getting inside the data centers and seeing their hardware, it's difficult to know for sure whether they have the chips they claim. The US has effectively banned those chips from export to China since 2022. They can do this because the most advanced chips are designed in the US and controlled by US law.
The restrictions are really on advanced semiconductors that could have potential military applications, and the goal is really to sort of choke China's AI sector and its broader AI ambitions.
The US wants to maintain its technological edge, and keeping advanced chips out of China is critical to achieving that.
America is the country that started the AI race, and as President of the United States, I'm here today to declare that America is going to win it.
But despite the tough talk, the White House has loosened some restrictions. In July, it announced it would allow an inferior chip called the H20 to be exported to China. Not to be confused with the H100 and H200, this chip is good enough to be competitive, but inferior enough to keep China a generation behind in chip design. These data centers challenge US policy because they claim to be able to get over 115,000 of the most restricted chips. But can they?
I talked to more than a dozen people who are familiar with US government investigations into this issue over the past handful of years. And my question to them was, are you aware of a smuggling network that is capable of procuring over 100,000 banned NVIDIA chips into China? And all of them said no.
Meanwhile, NVIDIA say there's no evidence their advanced chips are being smuggled into China, and argue even if they were, it wouldn't work because keeping the chips running requires NVIDIA's technical support, which they're not offering.
The question is, are the Chinese companies capable of procuring these models on a grand enough scale to fulfill these ambitions that are crucial to Beijing's AI agenda?
Bloomberg News has not found evidence that China has amassed or can amass such large numbers of banned NVIDIA chips. Yet, in Yiwu, the construction goes on.
If these data centers actually are going to be completed and can guess the amount of chips they specified in the investment plans, then it proved that US government so far has not been able to stop China developing their high-tech and especially AI industry from the supply side.
This is the NVIDIA H100 Hopper GPU, long the most sought-after chip in the world. This small square has 80 billion transistors inside and is designed for machine learning. It's critical hardware if you want to develop AI tools. And it was banned from export to China by US authorities before it was even launched in 2022.
The way US officials describe this is a small yard, high fence. So their aim is really to not disrupt the entire semiconductor ecosystem and the entire semiconductor industry, but really focus on choking off sort of advanced semiconductors that could be used for AI applications from getting into China.
China's created a colossal $48 billion semiconductor investment fund to build up its chip manufacturing. But despite the money, it still can't match other manufacturers.
The precision required is so advanced, it's kind of like landing on the moon, I would say, and I don't think that's an overstatement at all. It requires, the use of very specific lasers through sort of a web of mirrors, and the technology is really mind-boggling. It's very, very difficult to do. Even if China is trying very hard, they're still multiple generations behind. So I think that really creates, obviously, a very high in-demand product.
This Bloomberg investigation shows, despite the advances in Chinese semiconductor manufacturing by the likes of Huawei, Chinese firms still aspire to buy massive volumes of banned NVIDIA chips.
One NVIDIA's H100 chips can achieve maybe 3 to 4 times more of the computing power from the local design chips. So that's how NVIDIA chips has been sought after in China.
By Huawei's own account, and that of several US government officials, the best Chinese chip, the Huawei Ascend series, is still at least a generation behind.
China's chip manufacturing is still playing catch-up. When or even if China can equal the US is a hotly contested issue. But in spite of the technical hurdles, China's AI models are beating expectations. DeepSeek upended the perception of Chinese AI overnight. The company claimed it had used lower efficiency chips, ones that were legal to sell to China for almost a year, to train its large language model. But not everyone's so sure.
Washington suspects that they may have had access to H100s, and DeepSeek has also expressed interest in these facilities that theoretically would contain H100s. They don't need them, they obviously want them.
An employee of one of the large investors in the Yiwu site told Bloomberg DeepSeek has already expressed interest in cooperating. Bloomberg reached out to DeepSeek for comment, but they did not respond. China's technology ambitions might begin at home, but they spread around the world.
China really wants to lead the world here, not just close the development gap with the US, but be a leader. They really want the rest of the world, and especially the global south and emerging markets, to really be relying on Chinese AI technology and using Chinese AI products and relying on their AI infrastructure.
But China's strategic rival across the Pacific is also investing colossal sums in AI. NVIDIA alone has promised $500 billion of investment in US chip manufacturing. So how do these desert data centers compare? Can China really match up against the US?
For comparison, we have 115,000 some chips across these two complexes in the Chinese desert. The first data center for Stargate, which is this Trump-backed OpenAI endeavor with a bunch of other American companies to build a whole bunch of data centers on American soil, would involve 400,000 of NVIDIA's best chips, the generation ahead of the models that the Chinese companies are seeking.
But these sites represent just the tip of China's data center iceberg. Sites like this are being built across the country. DeepSeek took the world by surprise, and China's hoping it can do it again.
As long as there have been computers, there have been people finding ways to infiltrate them, manipulate them, and disrupt them.
Massive and ongoing Chinese hack.
Investigating a Chinese hack of major telecommunications companies.
Cyber espionage is really a normal fact of life, but the growth and intensity of China's cybersecurity industry, including its hacking, has taken the world by surprise.
China has gone after electrical grids, water treatment facilities, and telecoms associated with the United States. Critical infrastructure.
The Chinese may not be as sophisticated as the United States, but on every level, China has been moving with substantial determination.
Last year, a Chinese cybersecurity firm had its secrets basically leaked online. It was really astonishing because it gave us an insight into the inner workings of Chinese cybersecurity.
China has, over the last 20 years, systemically tried to grow and shape its hacker ecosystem into something that it can plug directly into its cyber operations.
Their goal in accessing and maintaining access to those systems is to provide military leadership the option to stop their function.
Okay, let's get started. Are you ready? Yes, sir. Let's kick it off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is one of many global hacking competitions. Since 2007, Pwn to Own has attracted some of the world's best hackers, or researchers. Not all hackers are criminals with malicious intentions. With a focus on real-world devices, their goal is to find weaknesses or holes in software, known as vulnerabilities, and exploit them for a cash prize.
And now you can see inside the RF enclosure we have this year we're doing EV chargers, including the Tesla wall connector. Many people don't realize that an EV charger actually can communicate to a vehicle and vice versa. Let's say you pull up to a charger and you just plug in your car. You come back later, your car is charged, you drive off. Now, unbeknownst to you, your vehicle was compromised. A few days later, you might need to charge again. Then you went to a second charging station and your vehicle compromised a second EV charger. So it keeps spreading and spreading and spreading. And once you take over a vehicle like that, you can do a lot of different things. You could potentially mess with systems that really operate the function of the car. And in the worst case scenario, you could take over the autopilot of one of the self-driving cars and actually cause a wreck with the self-driving capabilities. So that's one of the things that we are really looking to see this year, not to just get bugs identified, but to get them fixed before they're exploited by someone on the black market.
All right, we have a success.
Congratulations!
They were able to get it on their second attempt, so they will head off to the disclosure room to talk about all of the details.
Once escorted off stage, this hacking team must then share the vulnerabilities they've found directly with the company, in this case, Tesla.
From the minute it's done, the vendors are able to start working on fixes.
Teams from 13 countries, including Vietnam, France, Germany, and North America, are taking part, but none from China. There was a time, however, when Chinese teams were an unstoppable force.
Teams from Tencent and 360 and Qihu, they did very well in years past, and they really saw Pwn2Own as an opportunity to show their research prowess. They stopped in 2018 after the Chinese government decided to restrict Chinese teams being able to compete in competitions outside of China.
This absence from international competitions was one of several government policies that many cybersecurity experts believe is part of a broader strategy developing in China for over a decade.
When Xi Jinping comes into power in 2013, Edward Snowden had already leaked documents from the NSA detailing U.S. offensive capabilities. They're watching the Arab Spring happen. They are very aware that regime instability can occur from lack of control over content on the internet.
They made a decision to really go deep and hard on this and invested in their talent, invested in their programs, invested in their tech.
From 2015 to 2017, the government put a bunch of policies in place at universities that improved the cybersecurity degree curriculum. In 2018, they started promoting hacking competitions through government ministries.
They ended up spinning up a very famous hacking competition called Tianfu Cup. The difference between Tianfu Cup and other international hacking competitions was that Tianfu Cup would take vulnerabilities and feed them straight into the Chinese intelligence community. So say you, a Chinese researcher, have a really cool vulnerability that you found in the iPhone and you exploit it at this competition. The organizers of that competition will take that very cool iPhone vulnerability and send it to the Chinese police, who will then use it to spy on the Uyghur population in Xinjiang. We know that that happened back in 2021.
And finally, in 2021, they rolled out a policy that has not been matched anywhere else in the world. The regulation on the management of software vulnerabilities requires businesses, quote, doing business in China to provide software vulnerabilities to the government within 48 hours of them becoming aware of them.
That means the government gets almost immediate access to newly discovered vulnerabilities. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that the regulation's aim is to prevent the leakage and unauthorized disclosure of vulnerable information. It also supports reporting these vulnerabilities to the product providers directly. While the US government is also known to collect vulnerabilities, researchers and companies are not legally obliged to disclose information to them.
We're talking about agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency who have discovered vulnerabilities that they don't want to reveal so that they can attack systems in other countries. China's the same.
In many ways, Chinese and US hacking teams have similar goals.
They want to control the information environment. They're also potentially preparing their military for cyber action in the event of an attack.
As part of that strategy, and to compete alongside other cyber superpowers, China's state-sponsored hacking competitions have grown significantly.
In the United States, the hacker competitions are far more decentralized than they are in China. But in the Chinese case, and in hacker competitions globally, is that really amazing talents are regularly exposed and then sucked up by the intelligence agencies or by clever corporations.
According to an Atlantic Council report, 129 different hacking competitions have occurred in China since 2004, with most starting after Xi Jinping came into power. The largest of which was the state-sponsored Wongding Cup, hosting 35,000 participants. In 2024, the world was offered a rare glimpse into this hacking ecosystem through a purported data leak from Chinese cybersecurity firm iSoon, a leak that industry experts believe to be authentic. The documents posted to code-sharing site GitHub seem to suggest the Chinese government contracts smaller private firms to hack on its behalf.
There were some pretty interesting documents that showcased the hackers inside iSoon doing the operations themselves. There's chat logs between multiple engineers in iSoon over WeChat going, hey, do you think you can get into this system? The person responds with, yeah, like 80% chance, and if I don't get in, I'll leave immediately. And then a couple of seconds later, you see the chat bubble go, mail server, meaning that they got into the Outlook inbox of whoever they were hacking at the time. The other particularly unique element that is revealed in the iSoon documents is how pervasive hacking is in the Chinese state. iSoon itself had contracts not just with national or provincial law enforcement, but also city law enforcement branches. This is the equivalent of the Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, Ohio Police Department contracting out services to a bunch of hackers.
It showed the link between not only the cybersecurity firms with the government, but also the through line from these hacking contests and the vulnerabilities that they discover going to a lot of these firms that they then use to ostensibly hack on behalf of the Chinese government.
iSoon employees and government officials have now been charged by US prosecutors.
Chinese hackers busted. The department is accusing China's intelligence services of hiring the suspect to target specific victims with these cyber attacks.
In response, China has denied involvement with iSoon and accused the US of conducting its own cyber espionage attacks.
作为全世界最大的黑客帝国，美方的相关做法是虚伪的双重标准。
The tensions between the US and China have really rippled across the world, and a lot of the consequences of that have taken the form of cyber espionage campaigns and disruption campaigns.
The targets include phone companies and state agencies in India, Malaysia, and Taiwan, as well as the British government and a couple of think tanks in London.
According to news reports, in the last year, 2 suspected Chinese state-backed hacking groups have been identified in US infrastructure. One, called Salt Typhoon by Microsoft, was allegedly tied to a breach of the US Treasury, as well as telecommunication networks.
So Verizon, AT&T, Lumen had call data and call records taken of many US citizens that were already in the hands of that company.
Meanwhile, the FBI says another group known as Vault Typhoon has also infiltrated critical infrastructure.
The term that the experts use is called living off the land. So you can't see them because they're not doing anything out of the ordinary. They're existing within the environment that they have embedded themselves into. So that makes them really, really hard to detect.
Hi, are you Jamie?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Kate, nice to meet you.
You better come
Dragos is a US-based industrial control system security firm with miniature facilities that simulate how critical infrastructure could be hacked.
It's all connected through, networks for the most part, and some of these could be accessible from the internet. That's kind of a large vulnerability to it. What I have set up here is just a computer that's outside of the network. It's trying to get into the network. And just using the tools that are available on the laptop, just figuring out how to get into this system. So I'm just checking if normal remote access tools are going to be available and log in as though I were the operator and adjust the water flow. So here you'll see it.
An intruder in key systems opens up countries to potential disruption attacks, crippling them in times of conflict or unrest.
So let's say the electricity has been compromised and now no one has power in the city. You may have a generator backup that uses oil, but your oil refinery now has no power, so you're not making any more oil either. So it kind of has this domino effect where even your backups or the things that power your backups will slowly become unavailable as resources run out.
So the hospital would be in trouble.
They should have generators, but yes, they would be in trouble within a day.
And all the other kind of critical services would also be impacted.
Yeah.
Experts say a recent Volt Typhoon hack on the US territory of Guam, which has the closest military base to Taiwan, may be part of a strategic cyber warfare plan. According to a Bloomberg investigation, hackers hit telecom, federal and military networks and may never fully be removed.
Having Guam's systems be impacted in that way has really put out the signal that the military forces in the US may be disabled from being able to respond in a way that is immediate and urgent.
中方一贯坚决反对并依法打击黑客攻击行为，敦促美方停止利用网络安全问题污蔑抹黑中国。
The United States information and communications technology sector has been booming for about 50 to 70 years. The Chinese telecommunications sector has been booming for about 20 years. It's pretty hard to imagine that China could have overtaken the United States. China distinguishes itself mostly by the scale of its operation, by the way in which it penetrates almost anything.
To quantify what we're up against, the PRC has a bigger hacking program than that of every major nation combined. In fact,
when it comes to mitigating risks against Chinese hacking activity, it's not very likely that you're going to prevent a Chinese hacker from wanting to keep doing what they're doing. However, being able to push for more international norms around responsible disclosure, around making sure that technology stays safe online is a really important policy position that Western governments are trying to continue to push.